Hello and welcome to week 3 of Renee's House of Quilting Spring Club. Today I'm going to do a tutorial on the folded corner clipper from Creative Grids. It's this little ruler here, and it's used in the patterns for 2 of the table runners that we did for the club. These are the table runners. The first one was from the pattern called Begonia. The second one was from the pattern called Lanterns. The tools that you will need is a rotary cutter and a mat, obviously the ruler, the 2 patterns, the Begonia and the Lanterns table runner, which are in your kit from Renee. I also use heavy hold starch. I highly recommend a 1/4 inch foot for your sewing machine. That comes with your ruler shows several methods for using the ruler. In the top left you can see that it shows the diamond and a square and a snowball and flying geese, and then it goes on to show you how to do those different techniques. On the back it goes into cutting. The Begonia pattern uses half square triangles and the sew and flip method to construct the blocks for this table runner. For the half square triangles in this table runner, the Begonia table runner, I went back to the 4-in-1 triangle ruler and used that method to make my half square triangles because they are using a 5-inch square to construct them. The technique for the sew and flip has you either sewing and having that triangle piece flip up to the right, or sewing and having that triangle piece flip up to the left. To have that triangle flip up and to the left, you need to rotate that ruler so that the 2.5 inch, this is a 2.5 inch square here, that 2.5 inch line lines up on the right side of that square. In the pattern, she shows that quite clearly. She has the ruler rotated with the right side of the 2.5 inch square lined up with the 2.5 inch line on the ruler. If you want that triangle to flip up to the right, you place the ruler squarely on your 2.5 inch square and you line that 2.5 inch line with the bottom and then the straight edge of that ruler on the left side of your square. Because I want this triangle to flip up and to the right, I lined up the edge of the ruler to the left edge of the 2.5 inch square, and then I lined up the bottom line of the ruler, the 2.5 inch line of the ruler, along the bottom of that square. And then you're going to cut it. So that leaves you a little half square triangle. And if you're crazy like Donna Grayson, you can sew these all together and make things. But actually I either throw them away, don't tell anybody, or I can use them for leaders and followers. Sew your 1/4 inch seam allowance. I highly recommend that you start off with a leader because that way you're not going to cram that little corner down into your feed dog. These are bias edges that you're sewing together, so you don't want to stretch them as you let the machine feed it through. The other thing is flip it up, hence the sew and flip method, and then just finger press it along that seam. If you use your iron, it's an up-down method. Don't iron it. You just want to press it. The Lantern table runner uses the flip and sew and flip method to make block A, block B, and then also to create flying geese. You can also use this ruler to trim half square triangle blocks that you've made. So before you press that block open, while it still has its right sides together, you line up whatever size unfinished block that you want. Now this is laying on the 2-inch line. That's going to give me a 1. Once you trim this block, you'll be left with a 2-inch unfinished, 1.5 inch finished half square triangle block. As with the 4-in-1 triangle ruler, you can use this ruler to cut half square triangle blocks from strips. You place it as shown here. This happens to be a 2.5 inch strip, and you make a cut. So that would be your first cut. You're going to rotate it, the ruler, And you're going to line that up like that, and that'll be your second cut. And you could go along your strip to cut half square triangle blocks. Cut up to a 5-inch strip using this ruler. The method that I really liked using this ruler is to make your bindings. You know, you usually have to draw a line on the wrong side of your strip and then lay that right sides together over your other strip. In this technique, you lay both your strips right sides up. So these are my 2 strips, right sides up. Then you take the ruler and you line it up. This happens to be a 2-inch strip because that's what I had left. So this is my 2-inch strip. I'm going to line it up, and now I don't have to draw that line. I just cut this right away. So I'm going to cut that away. And then you take your the top strip, place it right sides together on the bottom strip, and then you're going to sew where that red line is. That would be your 1/4 inch mark. Stitch your 1/4 inch seam, press it open, and then you have a perfect, pretty perfect piece of binding. This makes joining several pieces of binding strips together much faster. I really liked this method and have used it ever since. Lots of patterns are using this sew and flip method. This is the book from Lori Holt called Prim and Proper, and just this page alone you can see all the technique, you can see all the blocks that she uses this technique in. This other pattern that I really like is called Inkling, and it also uses that same technique, that stitch and flip. They both tell you to mark it and then stitch it and then cut it away, but it is much faster to use the folded corner clipper, get that right, to do this technique. As with a couple of the other table runners that I made, I created this first in EQ8 so that I could see what these fabrics were going to look like and where to place them. This is my rendering in EQ8, and you can see that it looks exactly like my finished product. I wanted to give you some tips on step 3 of the lantern table runner. She says that you need to match the seam lines points where indicated by circles. So in this area here, you need to match those points. The method that I use is at your 1/4 inch seam allowance line, and you can mark it or eyeball it. If you've been sewing quilts as long as I have, you're pretty good at eyeballing it. But if not, draw a line. Take a straight pin and put that straight pin right between those 2 seams that you want to cross and the points to meet. So I put that through there, let it come out the other side. Make sure it's straight. Don't have it going this way or that way, up or down. Just let it hang straight. Then take and I slide that back and push it down in. Now when I stitch these 2 together at a scant 1/4 inch, I should have a perfect intersection. I sewed them together using a scant 1/4 inch. You can see I'm just above that line that I marked. And when you open it up, you have your 2, when you open it up, that seam intersection should match quite nicely. And you can see that I have my 1/4 inch seam allowance right there. So when I stitch it, I'm not cutting off any points. I did simple quilting on these table runners, and I saw this method on Pat Sloan where she took a piece of painter's tape and marked from, in this case I marked from this point here to this point here. Using my walking foot, I stitched along that, picked the piece of tape up, moved it, and just kept going. Or you can, if you're not Scotch like me, just use more than one piece of tape. For this part here, I just lined up 1/8 inch from my edge of my 1/4 inch foot and did that. So I liked the way that it came out. It, in my mind, didn't need a lot of quilting. Plus, sometimes you just want to get a project done, and I'm not real good at free motion quilting, so stitch in a ditch is my thing to do. For the begonia runner, I used the serpentine stitch on my Bernina, and as you can see, I stitched on either side of that tape that I laid down the center of the table runner. I did that all the way out, and I liked the look of it. There's little straight lines on those little half circles on the fabric, so I thought that that kind of mimicked that. Renee just got in this panel from Moda. It's called Lakeside Story. As you can see, it's Michigan. And I'm going to create something using this. And on the last video, next Monday, I will show you what I made and how to make it. This panel is a third of a yard, I believe. It's $5.49. It has this big one with the robin, and then it has actually on the other panel a map of Michigan, and yes, Traverse City is on that. And then it has four smaller panels that are included. So like I said, it's $5.49. She only got one bolt of it in, so she doesn't have too many. So if you're interested, give her a call and have her hold it for you. And next week, I'll show you what I did, and there will be a free pattern to make what I made with it available at Renee's. God bless you all. Keep you safe, and thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.